Hello, friend. Thank you for being here. Whether it's just for a fleeting moment or in the middle of a quiet storm, rising somewhere deep within you, there's a truth no one ever tells you about Aries. They don't walk away because they stopped loving you. They walk away because in that love, they can no longer recognize who they are. And the saddest part is, people only notice the fire has gone out when the darkness starts creeping in. Today, I invite you to take a quiet step with me into the deepest chambers of an Aries heart, where love and letting go always walk hand in hand, like light and shadow, side by side. We begin with the very first moment. The moment a flame once thought to be eternal starts to flicker and fade. Some flames are born to warm someone's soul. Some flames are meant to light the way in darkness. And some flames, they exist to remind us of this. Even the brightest love, without understanding and reverence, can still burn out in the very place it once shined the most. Aries is that kind of flame. You'll recognize an Aries in love by the way their eyes give them away, by how their breath quickens when they see you smile, by the way they walk into your life, like they've been waiting there forever. No calculations, no hesitation, no turning back. Aries loves as if today were the last day love would ever exist. They love with the courage of a child and the heart of a warrior, and maybe that's why, when an Aries lets go, the world inside them collapses like a sacred temple that's just lost its light. But here's the truth no one dares to say out loud. Aries doesn't walk away because they stopped loving. They walk away because in that love they can no longer recognize who they are. To them, love should never feel like a golden cage, or a land where they must ask permission just to be themselves. Have you ever been in a relationship where every morning you looked in the mirror and couldn't find yourself anymore? Have you ever loved someone so much that in trying to hold on to them, you lost pieces of yourself along the way? That is exactly what has happened, is happening, and will continue to happen to so many Aries out there, because they were never born to love halfway. When they love, they give it all. And when they choose to stay, they carry, they endure, they sacrifice, they change, until all that's left is a tired shadow of who they used to be. And that is when the flame starts to fade. No one puts it out. It just runs out of fuel, because that sacred fire must be fed with understanding, with those silent moments where no words are needed, with unbroken trust, and with the kind of love that feels like freedom, not like duty. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that if a relationship no longer nourishes the soul, if it becomes forced, fearful, or full of pain, then walking away is not a failure. It's compassion for the other person and for yourself. Sometimes, letting go is how we tell ourselves, I deserve a love that doesn't make me question my worth. I deserve to be loved without having to fight to be seen. Aries understands that, but not right away, because they are persistent. They're hopeful. They believe that if they just try a little harder, everything will fall into place. They believe in miracles, even when those miracles begin to crack right in their hands. And so, the little wounds begin to pile up. Careless words, moments of neglect, the quiet absence of a simple question, "Are you okay?" Each one like a tiny drop of rain, falling on a fire that was once roaring, until one day you look again, and the flame is gone. Aries doesn't let go from a single scratch. They let go when those small hurts have quietly grown into a fracture, too deep to ignore. And the hardest part is this. The other person usually has no idea that they've lost someone who was willing to love them with their entire life. So what happens after that moment? After the light in an Aries heart goes dim, do they stay? Do they rage? Do they vanish into silence or say goodbye? That is when we enter a different chapter. A quieter one, where silence speaks louder than words, where every move Aries makes is no longer meant to hold on, but to slowly retreat from the life they once tried so hard to be part of. And now we turn the page to the first signs of withdrawal, where silence is not peace. A new layer of emotion awaits you there. There's a kind of silence that doesn't bring peace, a quiet that isn't about rest but retreat, a silent withdrawal that begins without warning. And for Aries, when they go quiet, it's the first sign of an inner retreat already underway. People often think Aries is impulsive, loud, reactive. Say it, do it, forget it. But those who have loved an Aries deeply, they know. Their silence doesn't mean they don't care. It's a red flag, a fire alarm with no sound, darkness settling in on a flame that's run out of wind and fuel. When Aries enters this state, they stop arguing. They stop asking, "What's wrong with us?" or "Are you okay?" They simply go silent and begin returning to themselves. You might notice fewer messages, or the tone starts to shift, short, polite, respectful, but distant. They stop sharing little stories about their day. They stop asking if you've eaten. They don't burst into laughter remembering some silly thing you two used to laugh at, not because they hate you, but because they are asking themselves, "Why am I still here?" They're wondering, "Have I drifted so far from myself?" Just to hold on to something that no longer feels right. This silence, this retreat, it's not about leaving. It's about reclaiming emotional sovereignty, something they once handed over without hesitation. In astrology, Aries is the first child of the zodiac, the spark of life, pure, untouched, but because of that, they're also the ones who lose themselves the fastest in love. They give everything they've got until there's nothing left for themselves, and when they realize that, they step back, not out of weakness, but to recover, to breathe, to close a door, just long enough to hear the sound of their own heart beating slower each day. They'll dive into work, into the gym, into personal goals they once set aside for love. They'll suddenly seem busy, not to avoid you, but to remember who they are. This is where most people get it wrong. They think Aries is punishing, being cold, playing games. No, this is Aries withdrawing their energy, so they can pour it back into themselves. It's their way of surviving the emotional starvation. They can no longer wait for you to fix. And you know what? Sometimes this withdrawal is the most beautiful thing they can do, not to abandon you, but to come back to themselves, whole, strong, no longer living half alive. In psychology, it's called re-establishing personal boundaries. In Buddhism, it's the beginning of awakening, when one stops expecting the outside world to heal their inner wounds and starts turning inward. With compassion, some retreats aren't escapes, they are rebirths, like soil resting for a season, so it can bloom again, like a wound that must be unwrapped and left in the open air to heal the way nature intended. If you've loved an Aries and you feel them slipping away, don't rush in to pull them back. Say this instead: "Do you need space?" Or simply, "I'll be here when you're ready." Because that respect, that moment of understanding, might be the one thing that makes Aries pause and choose to stay. And if you are the Aries pulling away, don't apologize for needing time. You are not selfish. You are finally doing what you should have done long ago, tending to your own flame before it burns out completely. And if you've ever stood in that silence, watching an Aries slowly fade from your life, share your story, because maybe, just maybe, someone right now is sitting in that same silence, wondering why the person they love no longer smiles the same way. But here's the truth: Aries doesn't disappear forever. They just need a quiet place to decide. Do I stay or do I finally let go? And when they stop fighting, that's when you'll know just how much of their faith was already gone. Stick around, because in the next part we'll explore. When Aries stops fighting, it means they are already halfway out the door. A hard truth to hear, but one that needs to be spoken. There are moments when the silence of someone who once burned so bright becomes the saddest sound in the world, not because it's loud, but because it's too quiet, too sudden, and too cold. Aries is the symbol of action. They are the first drumbeat in the zodiac symphony, the one who always says, "I'll do it, I've got this, I won't give up." And when it comes to love, that fire burns even louder. They love like warriors on a sacred mission, protecting, guiding, keeping the flame alive. They'll fight, they'll fix, they'll try once, twice, 3 times. But here's what most people don't understand. Aries can't fight forever, not because they're tired, but because eventually they realize they're fighting for something that no longer honors their loyalty. Picture a warrior once covered in glowing armor, sword in hand, eyes full of fire and faith. And then one day, you see them standing still on the battlefield. They remove the armor, drop the sword, turn their back, and walk away. No sigh, no goodbye, just stillness. That is what it looks like when an Aries stops fighting for love. They're not giving up. They're simply waking up to the truth that some battles, even if one, can cost you your soul. You might be shocked, because just yesterday they were still there arguing with you because you didn't reply fast enough, or because you said something that hurt them. But today they're quiet. No blame, no reminders, no more asking for anything. That silence, it doesn't come from peace. It comes from a wound that has passed the point of pain. For Aries, conflict means they still care. It means there's still hope. It means they still believe love can be saved. But when they stop reacting, stop getting mad, stop checking in, that's when they're already halfway gone, spiritually, emotionally. And not everyone sees it, because Aries doesn't scream in the end. They don't post sad quotes, they just change the way they see you. From being madly in love, to standing on the outside, watching themselves fade, from a heart that once burned with passion, to a soul learning how to close itself off. And that is the scariest moment of all, because Aries never leaves with their feet first, they leave with their heart. A heart that once gave you everything, now quietly pulls it all back in. Someone once asked, why didn't they say anything? Why no warning? But Aries did speak. They yelled in arguments, they cried in silence. They stayed up through nights waiting for change. The problem is, no one really listened, until one day they realized they've been fighting alone, and that's the day they stopped. Not because they're weak, but because they've grown stronger. In the inner world of Aries, letting go is not failure. Sometimes letting go is the highest form of victory. Victory over attachment, victory over emotional habits that no longer serve them. True maturity is not holding on at all costs. It's knowing when to release what's no longer aligned. So if you've ever loved an Aries and they stopped reacting, don't mistake it for indifference. They're not running away. They're retreating to protect what's left of themselves. And if you are an Aries, don't feel guilty for pausing. You weren't born to keep forcing something that dims your light every single day. You deserve a love where you're not the only one fighting to keep it alive. Sometimes silence is not surrender, it's the very first step back to peace. And in that silence, you may discover a deeper truth than any battlefield could offer. Not everything beautiful is meant to be kept. Some things, the longer you hold on, the colder your heart becomes. But when Aries truly lets go, they don't always make a scene. Sometimes, they leave in the most brutal way possible, in complete, unwavering silence. And that is what we'll dive into in the next part. The real reason Aries walks away, not because they are angry, but because they are wounded. Another chapter in understanding the soul of this sacred fire. There are goodbyes that carry no anger, only the quiet pain of wounds that can no longer heal in the same old space. And for Aries, that's when they walk away, not because you did something wrong, but because you did it one too many times, and each time, something inside them silently died, without you even noticing. Aries doesn't let go because of one single moment. They have the patience to forgive, the courage to keep going, and the hope that maybe tomorrow things will be better. But what breaks them isn't a single betrayal, it's the repetition of being ignored, of promises made and broken, of eyes that once burned with warmth, now glancing past them, as if they were no longer someone worth seeing. To Aries, the deepest pain isn't just being hurt, it's the quiet ache of realizing they're no longer someone you choose. In the beginning, you looked at them like they were your whole world, but somewhere along the way, they slipped to the bottom of your list of priorities. And love, when it stops being a priority, is like a seed left in the middle of a desert, not because it wasn't strong enough, but because no one cared enough to water it. Even Aries, as strong as they are, has a fragile boundary called trust. Trust that you love them, trust that you see them, trust that they matter, enough for you to hold on with both hands. But once that boundary is crossed, they won't scream, they won't beg you to change, they won't lower themselves to ask for whatever scraps of love are left. They'll just quietly walk away, as if they were never the main character in the story they wrote with their entire heart. The exit of an Aries is not loud, but it leaves behind a silence so big, the room that once had them feels like a place with no life left in it. Love for Aries isn't about grand gestures, it's about showing up again and again, about caring for the small things, not out of duty, but out of love. When you stop listening, when you stop paying attention, when you assume they'll always be there, no matter how distant you become, that's when they start learning how to build a life without you in it. Aries doesn't leave because they stopped loving you. They leave because they finally love themselves enough to not stay where they feel small. They need to feel admired, trusted, seen as something meaningful in someone else's life. And when that feeling disappears, when they have to remind you of their own presence, when they find themselves begging for emotional crumbs, they stop, not out of pride, but out of self-respect, because even the strongest heart can't keep beating for a love that never answers back. The lesson here isn't about how to keep an Aries, it's about not making them feel alone. even when they are still standing next to you. You don't have to be perfect to love an Aries. You just have to be real, present, and brave enough not to disappear when they need you the most. And if you're an Aries who's walked away, please don't feel guilty. You're not heartless. You're just someone who woke up and realized not every love is meant to last. Not every emotion is worth sacrificing your peace. Sometimes walking away isn't what you want. It's the only way to protect what's still unbroken inside you. And when that line is crossed, Aries won't beg. They won't bargain. They'll choose to leave. But leaving is just the beginning, because what follows is a sacred ritual. Only those who have ever loved an Aries can truly understand. They don't just walk away from you. They walk away from every memory they once called beautiful, and that is what we'll step into next. The ritual of letting go, the disappearance without a warning, where every trace is erased, not out of hatred, but in the hope of rebirth. There are goodbyes, with no tears, no harsh words, just silence. One day you wake up and realize that the person who once loved you with all the fire in their soul is gone quietly, without a single word. When Aries walks away, it's unlike anyone else. No drama, no noise. They disappear like it's a sacred ritual of release. To others, it might not make sense, but to Aries, it's their final act of protecting what's still pure inside them. They erase everything. Old photos vanish from social media. Those long, late-night messages gone. Even the shirt you once borrowed is folded neatly in a bag waiting to be returned. Not out of anger, but because they need space. Clean, quiet space to begin again. It's a kind of cleansing. A silent burning of a soul that gave everything for love. You see, a phoenix doesn't rise in sunlight. It rises from the ashes it created with its own flames. That's Aries. When love no longer breathes in a relationship, they don't hold on. They set it down with both hands, with reverence, as if placing the last beautiful thing they once believed in on the altar of God. Because sometimes the most sacred thing you can do for love is to return it to the light, not to keep it, but to honor it, to let it become something holy, a memory beautiful enough to never be repeated, a person worthy enough not to become resentment. Buddha teaches, not everyone who disappears from your life is a villain. Some are just learning how to become better somewhere else, on another path, where they can finally be true to themselves. And God says, some losses are necessary to lead you towards something better, not because you weren't worthy of what you had, but because He wants to heal you, to grow you, to lead you into a love that's more whole. Aries understands that. They don't see leaving as a failure. They see it as transformation, from love to gratitude, from pain to peace. But you know what's hardest? It's not the choice to walk away. It's facing the emptiness that follows, the bed that once held laughter, the song that once played for two, the morning coffee only made when someone was there to share it. Now, just silence. And that's where the real challenge begins. Not for the other person, but for Aries. They're not afraid of letting go. They're afraid, forgetting how to love, afraid that pain will harden their heart, afraid that this might be the last time they ever give everything. But in that silence, something begins to rise again. They start to come home to themselves. They write down forgotten dreams. They pray in the middle of the night. God, I don't understand why this happened, but if this is what I need for my journey, then please help me get through it. And day by day, even if it's slow, even if it hurts, Aries begins to rise. Not the same. No longer the one who loved without limits, but someone new, quieter, deeper, stronger. Letting go for Aries doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It means they've chosen to keep the best of it and gently set it down, like placing a wilted flower on an altar and lighting a candle, not out of bitterness, but simply to say goodbye. But after goodbye, what remains? Is it silence, or is it rebirth? Do they fall, or do they rise? Let's find out together. In the next part, the silent rebirth, what happens after Aries lets go. A new chapter, where the old flame becomes the light that leads their soul forward. There are earthquakes that make no sound. They happen quietly deep beneath the surface, in places no one sees, no one touches. And that is exactly what it feels like inside Aries after a breakup. You might still see them smiling, still polite, still calm, still working, walking forward with shoulders straight. But inside, a quiet collapse is being carefully rearranged. No noise, no sharing, no one knows, because Aries doesn't break in public. They'll wrap up all the unspoken words, the disappointments, the longing that has nowhere to go, and bury it deep in the heart where no one can find it. And then one day, when no one's watching anymore, they begin to rebuild, not to prove anything to the world, but to truly be okay. They'll start learning something new, maybe a language, an online course, or simply how to take a walk without needing a hand to hold. They'll change their hairstyle, reorganize their space, throw away what's too old, to welcome something new, all of it. A soft but firm reminder to themselves. I'm still here, and I won't stay in this pain one day longer. But the real beauty isn't in the outer change. It's in how they start to redefine themselves. No longer someone who has to lose themselves just to stay loved. No longer someone who gives everything to hold on to something never meant to be theirs. They begin to love without losing their identity, to let go without turning bitter. Psychologists call it transformation. Buddhists call it wisdom through suffering. And in faith, it's the quiet hand of God reshaping your soul, preparing you for a path you never dared to dream of. Some say loss doesn't make you more beautiful, but I believe that's not true for Aries, because there is a strange kind of beauty, a light that only rises after the darkest night of your life, and Aries, after the end, is that light. Have you ever seen someone shine brighter after losing something? They don't smile more, but their smile feels real. They don't speak fancy words, but every word carries depth. They don't rush into someone new, but they know exactly what they want, what they deserve, and what their heart will never settle for again. Aries, after letting go, is no longer who they used to be, but one thing still remains, a heart that burns bright, a faith that doesn't fade. They don't give up on love or destiny or the divine. They just choose more carefully next time. They'll love with a heart that no longer bleeds, but still stays warm, and they'll never again trade their inner peace, just to keep someone who stopped choosing them. You know what's strange about people who have been deeply wounded? They no longer need anyone to heal them. They become their own healer, and sometimes they even become the one who helps others walk through their pain. That's what Aries gains from that silent rebirth. And when they finally open their heart again, you'll meet a completely different Aries, not the one from before, but still burning, with a heart that never went cold, because anyone who's ever loved with everything they had can never love halfway. Thank you for listening. And this is the final chapter of this journey, the lesson after the breakup, and a blessing for your peace, a quiet pause to reflect and be grateful. Some people enter our lives like the first sunlight of spring, bright, warm, full of life, and they make us believe that the season will last forever. But somehow, in ways we never expect, they quietly walk away. What they leave behind isn't bitterness, but a silence that words can't quite name. And for Aries, the first fire sign of the zodiac, that kind of departure is never a small thing. So what do they leave behind? And Aries teaches us that to love is to be brave, brave enough to begin with your whole heart, brave enough to be loyal, to trust, to sacrifice, and brave enough to let go when love is no longer a safe place for your soul. They show us that what we call loss might actually be God's way of making space for something better to arrive. God doesn't take to leave you empty. He takes to prepare you for something more aligned, more whole. In every part of Aries, from how they fight, to how they stay silent, to how they walk away, there's a raw, unshakable honesty. And the most beautiful thing you can do for them, when the relationship comes to its final page, let them leave with dignity. No clinging, no blame, just a quiet whisper in your heart. Thank you for loving me that much. Now this may surprise you, but I don't believe anyone ever truly loses an Aries. You don't lose them, you lose the chance to keep growing with them. Because Aries doesn't love just to pass the time. They love to evolve, to grow with someone through every season, every storm. And when they go, part of them is still hoping you'll keep growing too, even if they're no longer there to witness it. Love through the lens of the soul isn't about ownership. It's not about deciding who stays and who leaves. It's a sacred meeting of two spirits who learn from each other and honor each other's freedom, even if that freedom means walking separate paths. We don't have to keep everything that was once beautiful, because some of the most beautiful things are meant to live only in memory, untouched, but forever real. A soft reminder that we once loved, and were loved deeply. If you're listening to this and you've been through a breakup with an Aries, I invite you to share your story, not to dwell on pain, not to chase regret, but because maybe, just maybe, your words could help someone who's still trying to find a way out of their heartbreak. Maybe, in your story, they'll see themselves and find the courage to move forward. And if you are an Aries, please know your letting go is not a failure. It is a form of wisdom, a proof that you love deeply enough to know when to stop. Not because you stopped loving, but because you finally chose to love yourself first. Believe this: God never takes something out of your hands without preparing something better ahead. Maybe it's not a new person. Maybe it's just a new version of you, more peaceful, more whole, and no longer needing to shrink just to feel loved. That's Aries, even in goodbye. They remain the light. Thank you for listening with your heart. May you have the courage to love deeply and the peace to let go when it's time.